lower here. So just as Leanne said, I'm going to do my best to read through this and honor our father, in a way as also our mother. Our dad, he was a hardworking man, an encourager to many, a believer in the power of education and the power of faith. His grandchildren talk about his life being a source of inspiration, a wealth of wisdom, love, laughter, and prioritizing family and education. He was so proud to be an OSU Buckeye, and we are as well. OH, Dad. IO. But we are so grateful that the parents, they started 529 college savings accounts for the kids. They had the foresight and preparation, and it was critical. He thought it was so important for the kids to go to college and not have a lot of financial burdens. Dad always said to, like Leanne, Glenn, and I growing up, you got to go to college. And then as the grandkids, you got to go get that degree. And he just knew that it could make a difference in our lives. And we will carry on that legacy through our children and their children someday. As Leanne mentioned, we have so many precious memories of our time in Ohio. Before it was the Deep Woods, it was Grandma Pauline's little red house that Leanne and I actually went through yesterday. It's been updated, but you could still see the bones in the house. You could still see Grandma Pauline with her at her little butcher's block on her stool. So it was precious to go in there today. But the property had many names. We called it the property. Some of the kids called it the Deep Woods, Falling Water 2, Happy Highlands, but there's just so many precious memories. Well, as Leanne said in her beautiful, beautiful poem, hiking through those woods when we were little with our cousins, finding little pieces of flint. And I guess I have to say, like stealing a cigarette from Uncle Joe's drive-through and smoking my first cigarettes out in the woods with probably cousin Jody. Sorry, Jody, had to. But anyway, it's just lots of precious memories out there. Whether it was fishing in the pond, and even at my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, when we're all together, the boy cousins had some challenge to each other that involved, I don't know if it was push-ups or what it was, but they all ended up skinny dipping in the pond. But just lots of precious memories. And my parents loved to cook, and I feel like that's something I embrace in our life as well. But there were many meals around the table and conversations around the fireplace. And when they first moved there, they didn't have a TV. There was just sitting around talking to each other. And Uncle Joe was there during the times of building the house, and one of the things, he was kind of the foreman, and my dad looked to him in so many ways, and they all had their family compound with their sisters, and it was so precious. But one of the things Uncle Joe did that Lou, his wife, reminded me of is he would go shopping on the weekends and buy a shirt, and happened to buy the same one for our dad. And if you saw in the pictures, there were some of them in some similar red plaid shirts. But also with Brother Jimmy, there's a cute picture here somewhere of the three of them when they were little. I don't know I think maybe 4, 5, and 6, but I see the resemblance in my boys, and I'm glad they have each other. Brothers, just as important, or sisters are important, but siblings are a wonderful thing. But before I came up and did this, I said to Leanne, I'm like, I want to say something, but there is so much to say. And she said to try and think about a particular memory. And so it does involve the property. And so it's when I introduced Chris to my parents. And so what it was is that we had gone camping in the Hocking Hills, and it more or less got rained out. And so the Hocking Hills wasn't far from the property. So I figured Chris and I had probably been dating about a week. It really was a week. And so I take him to the property, and Chris was napping or running or something, but it was just Dad and I sitting next to, they had these big windows that overlooked the waterfalls, comfy chairs. And so during that week, I had been offered a job in Indianapolis where Leanne lived at the time, and I had spent a couple years there as well. And it was a job as a nursing home administrator, and it was going to be my first facility all on my own. And I had been offered this job, and I said to my dad, I said, Dad, you know, I've done long distance relationships before, but I just don't know. I just don't know. And so our father loved to, when we were younger, lecture, give advice, whatever. And so I really felt like God spoke through my dad and said, Jennette, he literally said, Jennette, you should pass this one up. And I had goosebumps because I always liked, every daughter wants their daughters, or every daughter wants their father's approval. And so he saw something in Chris that his family that's here, and I appreciate it, that they saw. And you know, Chris and I have already almost been married 27 years, so he had some good advice with that one. Anywho, let's see, moving on here. But there's also memories of Vero Beach and Grand Harbor. You know, as kids, even us, like, it was just seemed so posh. You drive in and there's all these twinkly lights, and there's the beach club with cabanas and beachside service of drinks, and it was just we felt very special. It was a great place to be able to visit. And I think so many of the boys I know my kids, some of their first like meals, you know, were there at Grand Harbor. But there were lots of talks and dinners on the screened-in porch, and our parents shared memories. My dad loved to tell stories, and I know we're going to carry on all their lessons with us. With moving our parents out of their apartment, there were a lot of belongings that we went through, and I was very touched to find so many letters and emails that my dad had written. You know, you email, but then my dad printed them off, and I've saved some of them to give to, you know, the grandkids and some of the cousins, because they were just so well written. And you know, I just was amazed. And he could be very tough, but it showed his very sensitive side in all those letters. But when I think of how my dad and how he would want to be remembered, he definitely wanted us to talk about family and friends, faith and education, and his humble beginnings here in New Lexington, and how proud he was of his parents and his siblings. But he does credit his older sisters, Gloria, Barbara, and Janet, for helping to mold him into the man he became. And Barbara's kids aren't here, but I'm going to see them later, and so I don't know if they know the story of Aunt Barbara getting inducted into the National Honor Society. But my dad just tells that story, and he would always tear up because he was so proud. He's like, here's my sister. She's being honored into this National Honor Society. And he was just, he was still proud and emotional at 80, 90 talking about it. But our kids were given that honor as well, and he was so proud of his grandchildren. And we are thankful that we had that 90th birthday in May. We were all there. We were all there in Vero to celebrate our dad, and we're very thankful for that. And that poem, I'm so glad Leanne captured him reciting the home poem, but he also did say the home poem for his 90th birthday. He stood up the whole time and recited the poem, and he didn't miss a beat. And also, during that time, Leanne put together a memory book of the kids, of all of us, in letters, and we were so thankful to have those. Hold on just a second. Okay, but the memory book, in his last weeks, Leanne showed him the pictures and read the letters. And even though he was failing, we still made sure, Glenn was in Utah, but we picked up the phone and he got to talk to Glenn. He got to talk to Joe. Got to talk to Jimmy. And in his last days, he got to talk to his good friend Hal. And, so we were very blessed with that time. And he said to us, he's like, I lived a life with no regrets, a very blessed life. And correct me if I got this wrong, Leanne, but she and I would say, I love you, Dad, I'm going to miss you. And he's like, he kept just saying, you take care of yourselves. And he knew that we would be fine. And he wasn't worried. He was so proud of us. And there was one other thing. that our dad wanted us to share a little bit at his funeral, and he did literally write up several different obituaries that we weaved together. But on his 65th birthday, we were all in Vero, and we surprised him for his birthday. And Glenn, Leanne, and I wrote down 65 things our father taught us, and I'm not going to go through all 65. But Leanne's, we luckily caught us reading them on video. It's just too precious. But here's some of the things. You know, as we know, Dad memorized the 23rd Psalm. That was something he taught us, and the Lord's Prayer. It was very important to have those bedtime prayers. And it was a routine. And one routine we joke about was at working for PPG, he would come home and he would go upstairs to his room, open up a can of Stroh's beer, and have his Planters cocktail peanuts. He had to escape, and that was his little space, and we knew to give Dad his time. But he also did Sunday chicken dinners on the rotisserie after church, and in that video, he said how Happy did chicken dinners as well. Joe, is that true? Yes, and so that was something, a tradition. But he always said, what are your goals? You got to save. Save for yourself, give to the church, all those little things. You're going to college. He always affirmed how proud of us he was. And this is one that I don't know if cousin Paula knows this, but our dad taught us how to drive a stick. And most people don't know how to drive a stick, but he was so patient. And when I rewatched that video, he said, well, Uncle Dubby taught me how to drive a stick when I was 14, when he stayed with them one summer in Washington, D.C. And so he loved his sister, and we all loved Uncle Dubby. But a couple other things, you know, he had an appreciation for classical music that I do now myself. And he always taught us the importance of a firm handshake and looking people in the eye. But one thing we knew is if our dad ever curled up his upper lip, and he was getting angry, we better run. And he said he learned that from Grandma Pauline. I don't know, maybe. But one of Glenn's memories of things was our dad teaching him how to, you know, every boy needs to learn how to throw a baseball, catch a baseball, throw a football. And so Glenn tells a story about how his coach, he was playing Little League, and his coach teased him about how small his baseball glove was. And so Glenn's out in left field, right field. As a kid, how old do you think you were, Glenn? 10. And so, you know, he's out there, and here comes the ball, and Glenn amazingly catches it in his mitt that's too small. And he's like, wow, what did I do? And he just holds it for a bit. And then it's like everybody's yelling at him to throw it where it needs to go. But those are some pretty special memories. And I'm almost wrapping up here, and I've told people this story, but God has a sense of humor, and he's had a sense of humor through all of this. And when Leanne and I were there in Vero cleaning out his room, we literally, you know, cleaned out Dad's things after he had passed. We go back to the hotel after having dinner. She's like, I just want to turn on the TV. So she turns on the TV, and here is a new rendition of The Lion King. And it's not like in the beginning of Lion King, in the middle of The Lion King. It's right in the scene where Rafiki the monkey finds Simba. And I got to read a piece of this. But he says, when Rafiki first found Simba, after thinking he was dead for years, he told Simba he knew exactly who he was because he was Mufasa's boy. You know, Simba chased Rafiki until he caught up to him, and Simba asked Rafiki how he knew his father. And Rafiki said, I know your father. And Simba said, you know, Mufasa had died. But Rafiki proved Mufasa's soul still lived through Simba. There's the scene where Simba's looking into the pond or the lake, and he's like, that's just me. And Rafiki's like, no, look, your father lives in you. And Leanne and I looked at each other. We're like, oh my goodness. And there's been several Lion King things that have happened since then. It's just amazing. And I call them God winks, whatever you might want to call them. But it's been very, very comforting to know we will carry on our parents' legacy, and as will our children. And I'm going to finish up, but we're just so thankful that we were blessed with a wonderful father and a wonderful mother, and we will do our best to honor them. So thank you for being here, and I kept it together.